We are
We are.
live. Yeah. So it's Chris and Brian here from Resolve Technology. Today, Chris wants to talk about some stuff we've been dealing with. We're going to call it your file housekeeping.
Document storage.
Yeah, keeping your files tidy and making sure they get backed up and you don't lose anything. Talk a little bit about how that works with most clients with their internal network and how we try to, like, best practice, keep most of their important stuff on the files rather than their local PCs, and why you would want to do that rather than porting everything onto your laptops and
Yeah.
desktops.
So what Brian's talking about is everybody knows you got desktop documents, downloads, folders that is stored locally on the drive of your computer or laptop. A lot of small to medium-sized businesses don't want to pay for a full image or file level backup of each workstation and laptop they have because that can cost a lot, especially when you start getting into full image, which takes like a snapshot of your entire system. So what they do is they'll usually just back up critical servers, maybe 1 to 2 critical workstations, and we'll have full image backups and we'll have a file level backup running daily. It might be stored locally on site and also in the cloud following your traditional backup procedures. So anything really important, we usually have you if they know that, oh, where should I put this then if it's not being backed up? And I'm on a 7-year-old laptop. I usually have them save it somewhere on the server, usually in a standard setup. Each user has a map drive with their name that's not shared out to anybody. It's only accessible by them on the domain of the organization. So the domain being the server for the on-premise equipment. And essentially that we always make sure is backed up on a nightly basis. There's dozens of different ways you can go about it. But if their computer blows up or their laptop dies on them, we just set up a new one and all those files, the drive just gets remapped. We rejoin it to the server and then voila, everything's back. You still got to reinstall programs though, because it's not an image backup of the whole system. But that's not really time consuming. And for the most part, there's ways of automating certain installations.
Right.
Alternatively, you could also, this isn't technically a backup per se, but you could store it in OneDrive if you guys are on Microsoft 365 or your Google Workspaces. I would not save company data to a personal Gmail Google Drive or anything like that. That can be quite dicey if your account were to be breached, if MFA is not turned on, things like that. You got anything to
No, I was just going to say it's very important nowadays, even more so than it was a few years ago, that you don't save stuff locally, because nowadays all the data local to your computer is not stored on a spinning drive anymore. In the old days, like, we could recover using programs and stuff. A lot of times we could recover files from a spinning drive, but now it's just like a memory stick almost, and it's what they call an SSD drive, solid state drive, or an NVMe drive, and it's basically more or less like a stick of memory, and there's nothing you can't easily recover from that. You might as well
yeah.
just forget trying to recover from it.
Uh,
It's so costly to try to recover from that.
Other than being a higher cost per gigabyte for your standard NVMe SSD drive, while they're more expensive, they're faster. We generally recommend them today. But that's one of the main drawbacks would be life expectancy. Most of them have flash memory, and it can only be written to a specific number of times before its end of life. It dies on you. But for the most part, I'd say they're fairly reliable, though. I wouldn't say I'm burning through SSDs at a rapid rate, but there are tools you can use to check the health or the expected life remaining. And none of it's 100%, but that would be the main
So
back, I'd imagine.
yeah, to circle back, Chris, that's why what you're saying about what we typically best practice will have a user folder on the file server, and there'll also be your normal department file storage areas, and all that stuff gets backed up. So if you have something very important, you want to put it into those folders on the server. We see far too many people that are trying saving stuff locally, and it's not a way to do it. And when we go to set up a new machine for that person, it's a lot easier if they don't have anything stored on the local machine. Go ahead,
Yeah.
Chris.
Yeah, so another thing, the reason I mentioned that you can only write to the disk so many times before it's done is because you could also have a spinning disk drive for files that aren't frequently accessed, like video files. I see too many people like moving and to and from random local directories, video files, audio files. files, stuff that's infrequently accessed. If you have a second drive available to you, like a data drive, I'd store it there. Additionally, too, a lot of people love laptops today for the convenience. Laptops generally don't last as long as like a desktop, a tower computer. And because of that, there's some thermal limitations to a laptop. And the rise in temperature over the years of the device sitting on a desk with the power plugged in can technically damage, shorten the life of an SSD drive, which 99% of all mainstream laptops out right now are using either a SATA or an NVMe SSD drive. Things you want to avoid power outages too. That could potentially corrupt data or damage a drive, both spinning disk and SSD. So battery backup's important, not using a laptop until the battery dies and it cuts off power. Things like that is just a few things I can think of off the top of my head.
All right, Chris. All right, we'll leave it there. We gave you a little bit extra other than the file storage, but it's all in the same ballpark because this is why your IT people will say a lot of times to put your file storage on the servers rather than local for these reasons that Chris had mentioned. All right, I'll let you go, Chris. Take care.